This is Abe Friedtanzer from Awards Buzz, and I'm very excited to be speaking with Adam J. Graves about his short film Anuja. How are you, Adam?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me, Abe.
Of course. Can you tell me about the genesis of this project?
Yeah, I was developing a coming of age story, a short film that dealt with siblings. And we were coming out of the pandemic at the time. And for the first time, perhaps, at least in my memory, uh, discussions of supply chain went kind of mainstream, but everyone was kind of covering the issues from the consumer end. And partly because of my wife's family history, we were thinking a little bit more on what was happening on the other end of the supply chain. My wife's of South Asian descent, but her family was brought by the British from Uttar Pradesh in northern India to Guyana to work the sugar plantations as indentured laborers in the early 1900s. So labor issues have always been kind of a central concern of our family and her legacy. She's an artist, and her a lot of her own kind of artistic practice involves kind of investigating that history and kind of shedding light on these stories that aren't often told. So we were researching labor issues within the context of the supply chain, and we came across this incredibly startling statistic that 1 out of 10 children globally is engaged in child labor. That struck us as like an enormously high percentage, completely off, like out of the range that we would have ever imagined. And so we started to just kind of do more and more research. And the more we read about it and learned about issues surrounding child labor, the more we realized that there was an important story here to be told. And I have a background in South Asian studies. I'd lived off and on in India for about 5 or 6 years, studied at the Banaras Hindu University, and have a lot of contacts and friends in India. So my research naturally gravitated towards child labor in parts of the world that I'm deeply familiar with. And yeah, so that brought us into contact with various nonprofits in Delhi who work with children who are either are working or previously, like formerly working in the garment industry. And yeah, we just discovered that it was both an immensely important story to be told, because it is a global phenomena. Child labor doesn't only exist in India, but it's global in two ways. It exists everywhere, even here in Los Angeles, where I live, but also it's global in the sense that we, privileged people from, certain slice of society, are the beneficiaries of cheap labor. And unfortunately, a lot of times the clothes that we buy are made with children's hands, whether we know it or not, because there's a lot of lack of transparency in the supply chain. So we just felt like morally compelled to tell the story, but then we also realized simultaneously there's a lot of rich narrative possibilities that, there are so many wonderful coming of age stories, but they usually deal with kids who are like in school or skipping out of school or on summer vacation at summer camp. Not many films that we could think of off the top of our heads that dealt with kids who were engaged in work. But statistically, 1 in 10 coming of age stories ought to be about such kids. So, yeah, so we just thought this was a great opportunity to kind of use the privilege that we have as filmmakers to shed light on an important issue.
I was speaking to one of your fellow nominees for the Oscar about how, traditionally the live action short films are always, foreign language and miserable and depressing. And, you hit play on something like this, you're like, oh, that's what we're in for here. But as you said, this is a coming of age story, and there's actually sort of a sense of hope and possibility. It's not just all sort of burdensome and miserable.
Yeah, no, as we were researching and as we were doing site visits and meeting with more and more kids from the community, kids who were either engaged in work and attending a day school occasionally, or kids who have left that world behind and are now attending school full time. One of the things we discovered was that they were just full, like, just teeming with life and excitement and possibility, and had this incredible ability to find joy in otherwise really harsh circumstances. And so the tone of the film as we were developing it kind of changed as we came and got to know these kids more, and we realized that it was important to really pay tribute to this aspect of their the joyfulness that we experienced among them. And we didn't want to create something that was just doom and gloom. That was just, I mean, you could tell a lot of stories about child labor that are really hard hitting and just about the pain and the tragedy of it all. Um, but to be honest, interesting storytelling you know doesn't typically involve protagonists who are just passive victims, and these kids didn't strike us as being passive victims. You know, they each one of them sparkled with their own unique personality, and we wanted to make sure that our characters had agency, that they weren't identified simply by their place within this global supply chain, within this exploitative system, but that they were defined by themselves and their own capacities for finding creative possibilities within the context of their own existence. And so, yeah, so it wasn't, you know, this is not like, it's ultimately meant to be a film that entertains, that engages its audience in a particular way, like all great, well, all art tries to be universal. It just happens to be rooted in this world, and happens to feature kids who have this particular background in this particular setting. So, um, you know, the other thing I'd say is that we just increasingly felt like the kids themselves were the best audience, were like the ones that we wanted to please most since they helped us make the film. And so we wanted to make a film that they would actually enjoy watching, not just like some, because I have to tell you, it's this really scrappy project. It was basically myself, my wife, a couple friends, and then a friends of friends. And we grew the crew. The entire cast and crew is based in India, and we kind of grew it out from like our friend circles. And it was just a bunch of scrappy, mostly first-time filmmakers or students right out of film school, coming together to make this thing. And the whole thought of like Oscars was so far from what we that if somebody had told us at the time that we'd ever be in the running for an Oscar, we would have just laughed it off, you know? And so, we just, yeah. But anyways, sorry, but I realize though now that a lot of people are saying, oh, a lot of times Oscar films deal with like these, dark stories about kids being, suffering and stuff. And like our film is just completely not that, right? Yes, it deals with working kids because 1 in 10 kids on the surface of the planet are working. But those kids are kids after all. They're not just like statistics. They're not just pure passive victims defined by, um, aspects of their experience that aren't really in their control. They're defined by the things that are in their control. And that to me is what's special about every film, right? Every story, it has a compelling character or protagonist who has choices to make, who's determined, whose individuality is determined by how they respond to the range of possibilities that's open to them.
And where did you find your terrific lead actresses?
Oh, well, that was. I mean, they Sajda Patan, who plays Anuja, and Ananya Shanbag, who plays Palak, the older sister, are the heart and soul of this thing. We could have tried to make this film 100 times, and it would not have turned out as it did, were it not for the incredible luck we had in finding these unimaginable talents. I think anybody who watches the film will appreciate their performances and just how incredibly authentic and truthful and emotional they are. We knew we wanted to cast from the community itself. I mean, we were doing these site visits, we were meeting these kids. It immediately occurred to us like, God, this would be a really important thing to do if we could possibly cast Anuja from that world, partly because we felt that it would be the only way to really capture the authenticity of the story. And happily, we were soliciting audition tapes from professional actors in Mumbai in the kind of the Bollywood industry. But at the same time, we were working with the Salam Balak Trust, which is a nonprofit that we collaborated with based in Delhi that provides a home for kids who come from vulnerable backgrounds, living on the streets primarily. And they have a robust performing arts program within their orphanage. Partly because it was founded by the parents of Mira Nair, who were inspired by Mira Nair's film Slum Bombay back in the 1980s, and that's what initiated the founding of this trust. So they recognize the value of providing kids with an opportunity to cultivate their own sense of self-worth and confidence and expressivity through the performing arts. So they had a lot of kids who wanted to submit self-tapes for consideration. And one of these self-tapes came from a young girl who'd only been in the home for a couple months. And she came from a very vulnerable background, and that was actually in many ways mirrors that of the story of Anuja herself. Um, but she couldn't send us a self-tape right away because she was actually already filming a film, another project. She had a smaller role in a feature film called The Braid by Laetitia Colombi, a French filmmaker, beautiful person. Yeah, so we were waiting and waiting for this audition tape from this girl that we've heard so much about. And when it came, it was just like it was just beyond anything we could possibly imagine. Sazda has so much natural talent, and it's just we're just tremendous. I feel like it's an honor of a lifetime to have worked with her, and I can only imagine. Um, I'd hate to imagine it, but I can only imagine like if she hadn't found her way and happened to have come in contact with a social worker for the Salam Bala Trust who invited her to actually come in and attend informal educational programming, what would have, it would have been a huge loss for Sazda in her own life, and then us um, as just people who can appreciate the talent that she has. So, anyways, I sorry for rambling, but she just happy to report she's now living at the home and she's attending school and she's up very quickly caught up to grade level and so she's just yeah a remarkable person and I think she's going to have a very promising career ahead of her if she chooses to pursue acting as she gets older. Ananya was actually she's from Mumbai. She's a Bharatanatyam dancer. She's classically trained dancer, and that's really what she does. She never acted before, but casting director by the name of Aroma Modi saw her a dance performance and could just tell from her face and her expressiveness that she was a natural actress, and said, "Hey, do you want to audition for this film?" And actually, I was in Delhi with my family. We were doing because this is very much a family affair. This scrappy film. We were in Delhi. I was walking, going around with some friends and family, scouting some locations and trying to figure out how the heck we were going to film this thing. When Ananya came in to Mumbai to do an audition, and so my brother flew quickly from Delhi to Mumbai to meet with Romo and to watch Ananya, and he's calling me up. He's like, "This young woman is just perfect. Like we can't imagine it. No one else can play this role." And it's true. She's just again another tremendous talent. The fact that I think when you watch the film, you'll have a hard time believing that she's never acted before because she's just so natural in front of the camera. Yeah, and they just immediately fell in love. I mean, they really are they're like sisters, They each one of them actually has a sibling about the age of the other, which I think made it just work out better. So we all stayed in this little hotel, Bloom's Rooms in the Parganj neighborhood of Old Delhi, a couple days before, about 3 or 4 days before we started filming, just to like hang out and get to know each other and play games. We didn't do any rehearsing. I tend to think that, especially with child actors and non-professional actors, rehearsing doesn't necessarily improve performance in my limited experience. I know that other directors operate differently, but the way that I dealt with it was just we're gonna, try to create a kind of a supportive environment where these kids can bond and have and like find the emotional connection. And to be honest, it didn't take any time at all. My work was very easy. I just, these girls were so good. It was practically like point and shoot, Anything they did on camera was just amazing.
That's really great. And as you know, despite your expectations, you have made it to the Oscars. And I'm curious if you've had a chance to watch any of your fellow nominees and if there's something that really sticks out to you as particularly powerful among them.
Well, what's funny? So this is going to sound crazy, but I'm holding out to watch them on the big screen. We have an opportunity as I happen to be based in West Hollywood, so I can attend. The Academy does a screening of all the short films, and I'm planning on attending that event and then watching all of the films on the big screen. So I want to do them their justice, and see them. But I will tell you, I know some of the filmmakers personally. I've gotten to know them, and their other work is just really really incredible. So I think it's a huge honor to be counted among this really talented group of filmmakers this year. And you know, it's just yeah, it's they're also just fantastic people too, which really makes it all better. So no matter how things go, it's going to be a wonderful night. I'll get to meet many of them for the first time in person, and yeah, it's a really cool journey to be on with these guys.
Really great. You know what's next for you after this? Do you have another project lined up?
Lined up is probably a little bit sounds a little bit too formal. I can't say that, but you know, I am. This is a bit of a second career for me. I'm my day job is I'm a professor of philosophy, and I've just told the university, look, if I can get my feature film off the ground, I'm not coming back next year. You know, I'll be busy shooting, and that's my hope. I have two different scripts that I'm developing kind of simultaneously, and we'll see where it goes. I have to say, one of the wonderful things about this situation is, of course, the Oscars is like you know the all the prestige and hoopla around it is amazing, and the fact that so many people are now going to be able to experience the film. When we made it, we thought maybe only like you know my parents might watch it and my my in-laws and my kids. You know, we didn't know who'd see it, but now we know that like I think thousands upon thousands of people will actually be able to experience Anuja, which is amazing and immensely rewarding. But the other piece of it is just it is a it's give it, I've got meetings, you know, with people who are, you know, hoping to help me put together the feature film and yeah, and one of them actually does deal with an Anuja-like character, but it's set in a broader kind of international space. And the other one is a story about a father and a daughter. Um, and uh that story I have to tell you every time I just think about that script, I get really emotional. So I feel like that's one of the scripts that where my heart is really at. So
Well, I wish you plenty of luck with those and at the Oscars, and also a poignant viewing experience on the big screen of your fellow nominees.
thank you so much, Abe. I really appreciate it.